So who knows what Wednesday is? Let's say that with a smile on our lips. Earth Day! Alrighty, that's a little bit better. My message this morning is in support of that, and it is part of my favorite series. As I shared with you, I've designated this year as a year that I will be sharing with you some of my favorite things, from favorite spiritual teachers to favorite passages in scripture to favorite inspirational stories. I have a whole bunch of different favorite things. And this morning I want to share with you, yet again, a favorite spiritual practice. And that practice is best contained in these few words: walking gently on the earth. Walking gently on the earth. Say that with me. Walking gently on the earth. Walking gently on the earth. Now some might say, well, that's a great thing to do, and the environment is certainly important, but I'm not so sure I would call that a spiritual practice. Let me tell you why I look at it as a spiritual practice. To me, anything that requires us to live more mindfully is a spiritual practice. And to walk more gently on the earth requires mindfulness. Anything that requires taming our egos is a spiritual practice. And to walk more gently on the earth does in fact require us to tame our egos. Anything that requires us to open our hearts in a wider way to not just ourselves and our immediate family, but to the whole of the human family, is a spiritual practice. And the idea of opening our circle wider, our circle of compassion, our circle of care and concern, to more and more people, to all sentient beings, does in fact require us to be practicing spiritually. So this idea of walking gently on the earth is absolutely a spiritual practice. It is not just a good thing to do. It's not just those that love the environment ought to be looking at it. Every one of us who consider ourselves growing spiritually must be willing to look at this aspect of our lives. There's a whole movement called the Green Faith Movement, and maybe you've heard of it. The idea behind the Green Faith Movement is this very idea that regardless of our religious persuasion, that our connection with the world that we live in, our connection with planet Earth, is an example of our need to respond to it from a spiritual point of view. That we are here not to subdue the earth and to have dominion over it, but rather to be in partnership with it. The Dalai Lama has been cited as one of the world's spiritual leaders who is very mindful about the environment and speaks of it now almost as often as he speaks of the idea that his religion is kindness. He challenges us to look at our responsibility to future generations by our willingness to reevaluate how we are living today. The current Pope said some of the most beautiful and inspiring words in relationship to our responsibility to the earth as spiritual beings. He said, we must listen to the voice of the earth. We must listen to the voice of the earth. That idea coming from the Pope is descriptive of a new and evolved relationship that we are being challenged to have with this place that we call our home, with this place that we call planet Earth. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, has said that Christians have a moral duty to practice sustainable consumption. Sustainable consumption. That's a tall order. Sustainable consumption. Earth Day was founded, do you know what year Earth Day was founded in? Huh? No, in 1970. And it was founded by Senator Gaylord Nelson in response to an oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara that happened in 1969. He felt if he could catalyze the same kind of energy and enthusiasm and passion that he was seeing among college students in the anti-war movement, if he could somehow get some of that energy around issues of the environment, that maybe it would put it on the political agenda, and eventually we could start making some very much needed changes. And so he designated a national campaign to do just that. On April 22nd, 1970, 20 million people, mostly students, all across the country, from coast to coast at various universities, started to gather together to have a meaningful conversation about what are we doing about our air, what are we doing about pollution, what are we doing about overpopulation, what are we doing about endangered species, and on and on and on and on. And as a result of that very first Earth Day that was unique in it bringing together political alignment around such a broad topic, as a result of that first Earth Day, the Environmental Protection Agency was formed, and yes, I know that in some ways it seems as if the pendulum swung a little too far to the extreme, but what do pendulums do? They go right back to the other side, and eventually they find a middle ground. And I think we're beginning to move a little bit more into that middle ground, where we have to find a way to both care for our environment and also look at how do we care for ourselves, and where is that balance, where is that very delicate but very important act. In 1990, the movement had grown so much that what started with 20 million people blossomed into 200 million people celebrating in 141 countries Earth Day in 1990. Would you say that deserves a round of applause? And so we have an opportunity to exercise, to deepen and to broaden our spiritual practice in a way that not only benefits us, but a way that makes a difference in the world, one person, one choice at a time. There are 6 reminders I want to share this morning on this topic, of why this is so important and what it means to us in terms of our spiritual growth and development. The very first is this, that we need to be mindful of our rightful place. We need to be mindful of our rightful place. In Genesis, we're told that we are here to subdue the earth and have dominion over it. Boy, is that wrong. But Genesis is an allegory. Genesis is not meant to be taken literally. It's an allegory. The idea of having dominion is a dominion in consciousness, subduing our own consciousness. It is not dominion over the environment. G. Seattle said, the earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth. The earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. We must mindfully acknowledge our rightful place. We do have a place, but it is not at the top of a pyramid looking down. It is much more akin to being at the center of a sphere, looking out omnidirectionally. That is our place. Not at the top of a pyramid looking down, but at the center of a sphere, looking out in all directions, to either side of us, in front of us, behind us, above us, and below us. The scientist E.O. Wilson said, if all mankind were to disappear, think about that for a moment, if we were on the endangered species list, If all, and I know there may be some people you'd like to put on that list, but that's not what we're talking about. If all mankind were to disappear, the world would regenerate back to the rich state of equilibrium that existed 10,000 years ago. But if insects, which many of us would put at the very bottom of the pyramid, but if insects were to vanish, the environment would collapse into chaos. There is one species, if it were endangered, that would very quickly right most of the wrongs in the world, and that is our species. That is our species. And we say that, and we know that, not to make ourselves feel guilty, but instead to recognize the tremendous power that we do have. And power can be used to destroy or to build. Power can be used to hurt or to heal. We can excuse the misuse of our power in relationship to the planet when we are ignorant. But the moment we become aware, we can no longer excuse our abuse and our neglect. The moment we become aware is a moment that we have to rise and to shine and to say of ourselves and demand of ourselves a more conscious way of living, a more conscious way of being. And this is what mindfulness is about. A second is taking a long view in our decisions and our actions. Taking a long view in our decisions and our actions. You may be aware of this Native American proverb, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Boy, is that a huge moral responsibility if we really look at that. If we really look at that, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. It means that we must individually practice and collectively practice taking a longer view. I'm alarmed when I hear us putting jobs above the care that we need to take for our planet. And yet I'm an entrepreneur. I believe in everyone's right to work and to have a livable wage, but not at the expense of something that we cannot get back, which is our environment. And this is where we must, as a culture, begin to make more mindful decisions and say, wait a minute, what is the long-term implications of the actions that we are taking as a culture versus the short-term gains? We must not put the short-term gains ahead of the long-term ramifications. The third is to take time to be in and with nature. I know you know this. I know you know the value of it. I also know that you probably have a very busy and full life as I do, and you can spend so much of your time in front of some sort of screen, whether it's a little tiny one on your phone, or a medium one on your tablet, or a big one on your computer, or stuck in your car, or stuck in your office, or stuck in your house. But we do that at our own peril. We do that at our own peril. Did you know that there is now research being done on the link between green space and people who live near open green spaces and those who do not, and the health differences and the emotional stability differences between those who live near some green space and those who do not? So if you are not here, it's fascinating. A research study in 2009 by the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health found a direct relationship between health physically and emotionally of those who live near green open spaces compared to those who did not. We all know that vitamin D is absorbed not in in the seclusion of our homes and our cars and our offices, but it needs what to be absorbed by the body? Sunlight. Sunlight. I hope you'll make time to be with us on May 2nd, out in our beautiful property and walk the labyrinth. You'll get outside, you'll get a different perspective. The fourth is another big idea that to me really requires spiritual practice, really requires taming the ego, really requires opening the heart, really requires transcending selfishness or greed. And that is the idea of practicing voluntary simplicity and teaching it to our children. Practicing voluntary simplicity. It's another way of speaking to what the Archbishop of Canterbury talked about, that we must look at and in fact have a moral responsibility to practice sustainable consumption. I'm sure you're aware that if every single person on the planet consumed the way most of us in the Western world do, that the planet couldn't sustain us for very long at all. So what does that mean? What does that mean? As is true of all spiritual practice, it requires some reflection. It requires some honest looking within ourselves, not taking your neighbor's inventory, but taking your own and asking of yourself, what are the changes that I do need to make? Whether it's changes in what I consume, whether it's changes in how involved I am with who I put into office, whether it's changes in the kind of work that I do. Spiritual practice is about a deep inquiry within. It is about closing the gap between what we know and how we live. Voluntary simplicity, just holding those words, that concept in your mind, will begin to help reshape and reform what you vote for with your dollars. I confess to you, I've had an experience that I imagine most of you in this room can relate to. You go into the store to buy something that you do need, nothing extravagant, something you need, toilet paper. Let's make it real, okay? And while you're walking through Costco to get that toilet paper, you suddenly see something you didn't even know existed before you got out of your car. You didn't even know it was made. But suddenly, oh my gosh, I really want that. Raise your hand if that or something like that has ever happened to you. Of course. And if you held in your mind, before you walked into any store, the words voluntary simplicity, you might then be able to tame that ego that says, gotta have that, and say, wait a minute, do I really? Do I really? Why is excessive consumption a problem? Oh my God, we could spend hours talking about that. One very simple piece of it is, when that something no longer serves the purpose that we bought it for, what do we do with it? And where is away? There is no such thing as away. There is no such thing as away. I think it was in a TED Talk, I don't remember the young man's name, but it was about a young millennial, that's redundant. It was about a millennial who is choosing, in some ways, to live his life in a much more simple way. Not because he has to, but because he's choosing to. And one of the choices he has made is to live in a very small home. His home, some of you are nodding, you've seen it, is a converted Airstream trailer, all of 120 square feet. And it was fascinating to see how he is living in this 120 square foot Airstream. And he says one of the great experiences is he finds himself, when he shops, having to ask the question, not can I afford this, because the answer to that question is probably yes, but can I store it? Now please don't use that as an excuse if you live in a massive house to say, yes, I can afford it, and yes, I can store it, and therefore I'm going to buy it. You will have missed the whole point of what I'm trying to talk about. Voluntary simplicity. A fifth is to consciously eat lower on the food chain. It's going to become a necessity, maybe not in our generation, but it is going to become a necessity. The planet cannot support the diet of the average American. First of all, the average American's health can't support the kind of diet that the average American is eating. I think it was on an NPR program I was listening to recently, talking about the importance of small changes that each of us can make, and then when we have made that small change, sustaining that change and looking at what will be the next small change, and then the next small change, and so forth, so that we're consistently growing and changing. But in this NPR program, it suggested, we're not going to tell you what to eat or how to eat, but maybe what it is picking and calling Mondays meatless Mondays. So I'm going to eat much lower on the food chain on Mondays. If you don't know why that's important, just Google it. You will find the statistics of what it takes, not the statistics, the facts of what it takes to eat a primarily meat-based diet compared to a plant-based diet. Please do not hear me saying that this is a talk for vegetarianism. If you do, you will have again missed the whole point. The purpose of my messages today, and I'll do a little sidebar here before wrapping it up, is there are times as a spiritual teacher that I think my job is to comfort the afflicted, and there are other times that my job is to afflict the comforted. And this is one of those times. And I feel a little vulnerable because I'm not perfect in this, but I do consistently make progress. And to those of you who have made some progress, I applaud you. We need you to do that, and we need you to look at what is the next thing to do. What is the next thing to do? And that's my closing point. Do what you can, and do the next right thing for you. Whether it's reduce, reuse, recycle, or repair. Can you look at the various areas of your life, whether it is the car that you drive, or the energy you use in your home, or how long you take your shower, or how much stuff you keep buying, or how heavy your footprint is on the planet, and say, okay, now my practice is going to be, I'm going to work on this part of my life and improve here. Can you imagine if all of us really made a commitment to do that? To not just say, oh, I'm so happy because I have a Prius now, I have a hybrid, or I have a purely electric car. Wonderful. Okay, do that. And then what's the next piece? Oh yeah, it's remembering to bring those grocery bags, the reusable bags that I've got in my house. I've got to remember to stick them in my car. So I always take them out. Would that not be a spiritual practice? Why do you think that's a spiritual practice? To be aware. And we can say it's a double spiritual practice because the moment you catch yourself having forgotten for the 17th time, instead of beating yourself up, you go, oh, I forgot again. But I'm going to remember next time. I'm going to put them in my car. Is any of this making sense? Yes. Okay. One of the things, and I'm going to close here, that the Unity Center has been looking at, because we do look as well. What is our footprint here? Where is the balancing act between the comfort, temperature in the sanctuary, and using those resources? Where is the balance between, we made some big changes in the coffee that we purchase and serve. It's a lot more expensive than the cheaper stuff or the stuff that is not organic, that is not responsibly farmed, that is not shade grown, and that is not fair trade. We could buy cheaper, but we've chosen not to because of what we want to support. And one of the very big things that we are just probably days or weeks away from finally signing after well over a year of research is to install solar at the center. But it is not inexpensive, no matter how you look at it. And when we clap, do realize that the center is you, and the center is me. That to do these things, there is no sugar daddy sitting somewhere. There is no, there's not. Isn't that an expression? Maybe I used the wrong one. I know what I meant by that. There's nobody bankrolling the Unity Center. It is us. It'll be about $125,000. Yes, all at once. And please don't write me and say, did you look at leasing? Did you look at this? Did you? Believe me, you have got a board and consultants that we've worked with that have done all of those things and have evaluated all of the different ways that we can go. But just like we as a community have said this is important to us, we want to model as best we can with the resources that we have, those things that are important to us. That's the same challenge that I hold myself to personally as an individual who's committed to living as awake and as responsibly and as spiritually in integrity as I can. And I hold you to the same. That's what we are here to do. That's what we are here to be. As we individually make choices, those choices begin to ripple out and to make the kind of difference in the world that not only do we need to, but I think we have a moral responsibility to. Namaste.